We are back from our lunch recess. The time is 12:45 p.m. And let's pick back up in section 3, question 11.
Question 12.
I had a question on, in line 20, well, I think it's further down, before you go anywhere. In that footnote, it says appropriates, and I was wondering if it should be appropriations. Maybe made. Okay, so it's the last line on that page. Committees in each house of the legislature that consider appropriates. I think it's appropriations. So then on line 6, it says basically that the board overspent there, but I'm not understanding what the over expenditure was from this paragraph. I'm seeing like the $4 million in expenditures, but it only had an authorized budget. So where did the overage come from, or where did the extra money come from? Right.
For that particular fiscal year, it was for the AG augmentation. We had an AG augmentation, which was originally in some of the language, but somehow, some way it got kind of, yeah, we took it out. It was a lot of information. So we shortened it up.
I think it's actually in that paragraph further down, 155,000. Maybe we can say how to reference that. Sorry. I was just saying that that augmentation is contained within that paragraph. Maybe we can reference it somehow to account for the discrepancy in the numbers above.
And that's an easy fix. I just copy some language already written and throw in that paragraph because it happened over multiple fiscal years.
Okay.
I have just another comment above that. Are we done with, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I'm trying to sort of figure out where your line is in reference to mine. I think one above, Brooke. Okay. Sorry, keep going up. So we've defined consumer protection and continuing competency as enforcement. Administrative is administration, and then another paragraph or two down, we keep redefining them.
Throughout the fiscal years, sorry, go ahead.
If you scroll down, sorry. Yeah, we sort of do it again in that same paragraph that we've highlighted. Maybe just, we can just use the abbreviations. Yeah. Yep, that's it.
Just really quick, the reason that I did it the following fiscal year was because the fiscal year after that, the structure changed. And so now we have just the consumer protection services as enforcement, and not to include continuing competency.
Okay.
And I just didn't want to have that, just that question mark of what happened. But I'm not married to it, I can delete it.
Yeah, you can see the difference between 2014-15 and 2015-16. It was consumer protection, continuing competency. It became consumer protection, and the continuing competency was moved under licensing. I guess the question, though, is, do you need to include those parentheticals for 2012-13, 2013-14, 2014-15, when potentially it's all the same? Those programs didn't change until 2015-16. Okay.
So I can do that.
I think table 3 is also in dollars and thousands, the title, so.
In the footnote, the first footnote there, the third line, it says "are reported." I think that should be "were reported."
Should be, what was that, I'm sorry?
Were.
This table doesn't have a table number. Is that important?
This is an addition and it's not part of the,
I see, okay. And then Jesus, is this another dollars and thousands being inappropriate?
Yeah, you just need to divide your numbers by 1,000.
Question 14.
In line 25 and 26, we should delete the word dollars. It's in a couple more places, right?
It's, yeah, pretty much throughout there.
Whenever we use the symbol.
Yeah.
how does that sentence read, 24? Okay, I got it.
I have a question back to 13. And I understand the title is describe the amount the board has contributed to the BREEZE program. But then the next is what are the anticipated BREEZE costs? And we're not really contributing to a program. We're paying for. Those are costs that are associated with BREEZE that because of our utilization that we're, so.
Essentially, on their part, I think that's just semantics. They're literally asking for how much have you paid for up to now?
Right.
How much do you anticipate paying?
And so, and I'm struggling with that we've contributed to the BREEZE program. I mean, online, sorry, scroll up a little bit. The very first sentence on line 5 on the screen. The PTPC has contributed $610,000 to the BREEZE program, where if we can, I would rather somehow see that structured as our costs for participation in the BREEZE program have been this. The impact is different for me.
You could say,
We could take that word out. The purpose of, to answer this question, contributed is, just for this question, is because the cost is a shared cost. So it's actually a shared cost amongst all the boys and girls within the Department of Veterans Affairs.
but I think the question itself uses the term contributed, so perhaps it's just consistent.
That's what it refers to, the shared cost.
But actually, the question is, what are the costs? The title of the section, or the first statement, is describe the amount the board has contributed. But then the question is, what are the anticipated costs? So, yeah, I mean, it's a semantic thing, but
How does the board feel about that? I can take out contributed and put spent.
We may have a few minutes to.
Yeah. We may need to start all over again.
Again, I'm not engaged or married to the language. Blood pressure?
I've seen you save it a couple times, Brooke, so I think we're okay.
Breeze, Brooke has a very good habit of saving.
Yeah.
So, save damage, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I wish Microsoft would try a little bit harder.
This would have been a good time to take a lunch.
Oh, that's going to restart.
Okay, so one way to address this particular issue is to describe what it has already contributed, which answers the first part, and then what it projects on spending, or DCA projects the PTBC's BREEZE cost to be. So we're using contributing for what we've already done, and then using the word costs for what's to come. We could split it up, split the baby.
I'm pretty sure it's
It's pretty current, it has your dollars.
Yeah.
And I think we were right
There.
there, right? No, it's up, or it's on the breeze, right?
Close that left.
We lost one of the words right here.
So are we okay with had contributed, has contributed, and then not using contributing going
It's not
forward?
letting me.
Are we all on a carbohydrates program right now?
I'm fine with contributed since the question asks for what you've contributed, but then anticipated cost should be anticipated costs. I think you can go back to using that language.
We would be the lone standout if we chose
Not to
use
put
different
contributed.
terminology. Okay.
Do you want to show it, or are we, I think we just save it,
Save.
right? Just gonna save it. I'm gonna save it as,
That's good. Save it, that's all. So we work beyond that.
okay. I'm missing a
Jason, why are our anticipated Breeze project costs
Where?
looking to go down?
Thank you.
I don't want to lull this board into like a false, sense, but in March of next year, we'll be terminating our contract, assuming things go as planned with the vendor. So we won't be paying for those services as part of the contract anymore. Now, there is a potential that at that point, a new contract might be negotiated to keep them on board because there might not have been enough knowledge transfer between the vendor and our own tech group to kind of account for it. Having said that, if we are successful with terminating the contract with the vendor, you might still see a slight, well, not a slight increase, but less of a decrease, if you will, in costs because they might determine that more staff at the IT level is needed to manage Breeze. So right now, the costs are going to decrease projected because we're ending that relationship with Accenture in March. The high dollar vendor who gets paid a lot of money is going to no longer be part of the equation. We'll be paying DCA's Office of Office of Information Services to do those same things. I guess the big unknown for me that I want you guys to be aware of in those numbers is what would be considered what you used to hear as the Release 3 boards. Once some kind of determination is made as how to handle getting the rest of the boards and bureaus that aren't on Breeze onto Breeze, that may affect the way these numbers look.
In which way?
A potential increase.
So more boards come on and we have more
Yeah.
costs?
And our cost
So the first
increases.
thing you would think is now that there's a higher divisible, so the price should go down. But you still have to account for more development and design. So that as those boards come on, the initial capital investment of doing it really increases. But that's still going to be divided by the number of transactions that each board employs. So your licensing population affects that. And so you could still see an increase.
Sharing the love.
Yeah. Anything else on Breeze costs? On to question 14.
Question 15.
Can you go up to the chart in 14, please? Right, yeah, that's it.
Table 4.
Yeah. Can't see that far.
Brooke, can you blow it up a little?
In the PT foreign educated applicant, the third column.
Hold on, let me find it now. No.
Further-
Third column?
Yeah, right there. Yeah, right there. Just a comma.
I don't think those dollars are in thousands.
They are not.
I was going to say, I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
I was
seemed to
waiting
be the
for you.
default guy.
Your point.
But we've included that into the style guide for.
Everybody's going to go into retirement status. Can I get some more chocolate?
I'm guessing that. Was this table was provided? Because the question doesn't talk about revenue, it just talks about your
Yeah.
fee structure.
The table is provided. from the legislature's perspective, and the purpose of this template really is to see every possible source of revenue that is defined in statute. I mean, the only thing that really is missing from this are things like cost recovery that are a case-by-case basis, or citations, disciplinary orders.
I can't remember, would this be even though it's a new issue, would this be a place that you make mention of the retired status fee as a missing element? It doesn't look like it. If I just read the question, it doesn't look like it.
No, I don't think it would be either. This part really would be for informational purpose for an analyst to look at and determine what vehicles, what avenues the board has to generate revenue included in this report.
I'm wondering if we should, because where is it? The current fee amounts were established at the end of the fiscal year 15-16. And so the revenues that are listed aren't connected to the fee amounts. And so I'm wondering if we should maybe include another column that says fee amounts in 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, and most of 15, I mean,
Included as a new column past the footnote that we've...
Right, because the footnote doesn't, I mean, it helps, but I don't know that I don't feel like it's enough. I don't feel like the impact of the footnote really carries, because it doesn't give a sense of what and I know we described what the prior levels were, but...
I mean, you depending on, considering your audience, somebody might look at that and say 300 devised into 14,875 for that fiscal year and try to determine what the workload was.
Right.
It's more detailed than what they asked.
And the change for just the PT applicant from 14,875 to 220,000 in just 4 years is that 14,875?
That's an anomaly.
That's not an accurate
That's an
number?
error.
Okay.
So I think some of the numbers... We'll have to verify that column.
Daniel, are you pointing out that in most of those years, those weren't the fee amounts?
Correct.
That's the initial call out, but that 14,875 is definitely not the right number.
Looking at the other numbers, I would guess it might,
That one.
maybe it's supposed to be 148
Yeah.
something. But, yeah.
So is it something you think we could still handle in that footnote with just a little bit more detail?
Or maybe above, maybe a little blurb before the chart.
Yeah, and
Or if not, if you have,
to me, the easiest way would be just to add another column that says what the fee amounts from 2000 up to June of 2015, something like that, because then that addresses those fiscal year columns.
If I retitled we'll use that fiscal year 12-13 revenue. If I retitled that 12-13 fee/revenue, and then I put in what the fee was / and what the revenue generated was, would that bring it?
In each column?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
On line 8, I think we need to delete the S on analysts because you're making that plural with positions on line 9. And in that footnote, on the 3rd line, before overhaul, insert would overhaul. And that last line, it says the DCA CPEI. I think that needs to say the DCA established. So delete apostrophe S, established the, and strike proposed.
Brooke, I'm sorry, can you go up? Almost right there. So in line 9, you've got typing in parentheses as well as OT in parentheses. And then line 10, same, CPS in paren, enforcement in paren. Help me understand that.
So typing in paren, that's actually a distinction between 2 office technician classes. One that's actually proven the amount of words they can type per minute and one that hasn't, essentially.
Okay.
But they're distinct in that they're 2 different pay scales, so. We'll have to look at the style guide to see if CPS would still have to be there for calling out consumer protection services for the first time in the section. But for clarity, we are unique in that we've titled our enforcement program the Consumer Protection Services Unit, and analysts may be looking for a general or a generic enforcement.
Okay. Thank you.
On line 19, analysts, that should also be singular.
On line 14, support temp help staff members. You've defined temp help on line 12. Should that be capital T, capital H?
On line 23, in the parens, you list 2 BCPs. And that information, is that correct? Is that all 1 BCP?
It's 2.
Take the hyphen off of the 4. So.
Yeah, maybe just you could put a comma or spell out and. On line 20, analyst needs to be plural.
So which 3 positions did you get?
In application of licensing, it would be the AGP, the SSA, and the OT.
You got 1 of each.
We have requested 5.
You need the word, like, these three to kind of reference to, okay.
I'm just curious.
Man, every time the green bar flashes out, I freak out.
The punctuation question in that paragraph. In fiscal year 15-16, we requested special fund augmentation for 5 positions, colon, 1 associate governmental program analyst, comma, or semicolon?
Semicolon. I think that's the only one that doesn't have the semicolon.
No, and then one line down, 3 staff services analysts, SSA, oh, is it there?
That's a semicolon. But then and then
Oh, take out that comma
after and, yeah, it should go away.
Don't do it now.
024. So we can leave out VCP and VCP. That right there, that VCP. That is the VCP number. Right? So before,
I'll highlight it.
yeah, I'll figure it out.
The table is in thousands,
Dr. Dominguez?
you know.
The direction in the style guide is actually use dollar in thousands when appropriate.
Okay. So we
We're going to be
should-
checking all the tables for either or.
Okay.
So, and then
I will stop now.
on 23, the PTBC's request was partially approved, and it received a budget augmentation to establish 4 positions effective on the passing. Is it, we will receive a budget augmentation depending on the passage of the 16-17 budget? Or has the 16-17 budget so establish 4 positions that were effective on, I'm not even sure why we need to, if it was already done, why do we need to include effective on the passing of the 16-17 budget? Because we're in that budget year now.
And throughout the fiscal report, I'm writing for 15, 16, not 16, 17. Because it's, in the instructions we were provided, it was to report on those fiscal years, up to 15, 16. Does that make sense?
That does, but, so then that leads me to, if we're reporting on 15-16, and that's what we've been consistent in doing, why bring this up about 16-17?
They want to know what's going on.
Well,
But we're reporting on what they've asked about for the last fiscal year.
Yeah, and I think you,
So-
at that point, you do take that, that's where I kind of alluded to it before. There are going to be points that you can consider opportunities to stray from that.
Okay.
For this question, it asks submitted. And so with the VCPs, when they're building the budget, you're requesting it like 18 months prior. And so I have to, I feel obligated to report that we did submit a VCP because we would have submitted it at the beginning of fiscal year, probably 14, 15.
I think Daniel's question is, why are we talking about the completion or or that it was partially approved? If we're sticking to the 15-16 concept.
You're right, delete it.
Well,
That's right.
I think this
It's-
is one of
it's
those
a question.
opportunities, though,
But-
where, especially with BCPs, where you've made a request, and it's important to state that we were able to, after a very long period of time of having BCPs go by the wayside, have BCPs approved. you, Brooke. But you might have to delete it again. We have to just take a straw poll.
It does match the chart because it was already approved, but if we're reporting on 1516, we wouldn't have this information. So we're not going to. So it's something we wouldn't need to decide.
I think it's a very relevant piece of information to keep in. It's to our benefit. This really, for me, is the delineator as to, is it something that we feel is important to relay back to the legislature?
I'm okay with leaving it in.
So, and then I'm just struggling with tense then too. Effective upon the passing of this 16-17 budget or effective on passage?
I think actually you can leave it with that it was,
Or adoption of the 16-17 budget?
the period after 4 positions could be the end of the sentence. Because, speaking to tense, it's done.
Yeah, yep.
Well, you could also, and it received a budget augmentation in the 2016-17 governor's budget to establish 4 positions. That way, they know where it came from.
Four positions or 3? You changed it to 3.
It should be changed to 3 here as well. You guys are keeping a really good pace.
Cheerleader.
Question 16.
On line 9, I'm wondering if the word large is necessary. It seems gratuitous. We don't really know what large means here, but
On a large pool of, well, a large pool of could be struck. Just relied heavily on temporary help blanket.
I don't want to refer to anybody as being large. It could mean discuss.
Some people get really sensitive.
Or that somebody infers we have a swimming pool in the back. and let's get there everyone.
That's where the money's going.
And blankets.
We got people in, warm blankets and swimming pools.
Scroll back up slightly. So, line 12. I'm wondering if enforcement, licensing, and administrative needs to be initial cap. I think it should be because it calls it out that these are particular programs. Why did it stop it?
I have a question on the overall section, whether or not we should mention that we have been approved for a restructure, and that is opening up staff positions.
You haven't yet.
Okay.
You just made it past one more
One-
level of the approval
Okay.
process.
I thought, well, yes, my yes.
In that footnote, I think there needs to be a hyphen between BL and 12. On the second line, it should say the adjustment eliminates. It should be eliminated. And further on that same line, eliminated budgeted salary savings and allocated So delete the S and add a D on allocates,
I don't know, I'm trying to find it. Oh,
right there. And before you go, line 1. No. Line 1, PTBC's capital E enforcement. Should that be capitalized? Because I guess perhaps
No.
if we're doing it there,
It's describing expenditures.
okay. But then on line 7, I think enforcement and administrative should be, because we're talking about the services at that point. Line 14, before PTBC, that should have a T.
On line 12, is the number 4, should that be spelled out?
I left it that way to be consistent with the fiscal years. So the beginning sentences are numbers.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Line 19, at the end of that line, I think we need to move only to be placed before those. So to only those required by law.
And I have a question on the, above that table that you just went past. Can you explain to me why highlight that 5 positions when there's been an increase in authorized positions? I'm just wondering what the,
I wanted to highlight that because even though we received additional positions through the BCP process, since the last sunset, technically we've decreased in positions.
and the temporary help weren't full-time
No.
Correct.
positions. Was that the large pool?
It was the large pool. One of the things that we're trying to help or trying to show in this table is that, you know, since the last sunset, we had a pretty significant number of staff, but over the last couple of years, we've had reductions through budget letters, through the conclusion of CPEI and that kind of thing, where we have, through successful BCPs, been able to place bodies that work for us currently in a temporary help position into an actual authority position or a PY. So where it looks like we're getting all these positions, all we're really doing is taking our temporary help staff and making them permanent. There's no additional staff in the office. There's no additional staff that are there to do workload. So, and then the other thing to take away from that is that doesn't account for the growth. That only accounts for moving what we were relying on in temporary help and making it permanent. And we're about at the same level without taking into account that the licensing population has gotten larger and that the applications have increased.
And I think, as I look at it, I don't know what that 11, if those weren't 11 full-time temporary help people, that's like an oxymoron, then I don't know that the 3 doesn't equal 11 still.
Yeah, we struggle with that always.
Yeah.
When you start talking about 3.3 people, the difficulty comes into play.
And were some of the 11, 2 of those positions could have led to 1 PY, 2 of those temporary helps. So I'm having a hard time making,
And you are correct, because technically they don't. one fraction, because it's full-time. The temp help are counted as one.
Okay.
But overall, it's a body. And again, like Jason was saying, it looks like we received these positions all along, but really, we decreased in the number of staff members that we have to rely on to carry out our operations.
I think I just want to be careful that the rationale for moving temporary help into a permanent position was that we need to be more stable, and now we've got this much temporary help. This qualifies as something to be ongoing, but now we're turning around and saying, now we need temporary help.
The measure, and it is this kind of constant push-pull situation we find ourselves in, because the measure or the rationale behind having temporary help is to address fluctuation in workload, temporary fluctuation in workload, seasonal, or an increase that might not be a permanent increase. So we use temporary help for a certain amount of time to establish that this is not a temporary workload, it's a permanent workload. And once those numbers add up enough to where we can then submit a request in the BCP with the sufficient rationale behind it, we transition that person into the permanent authority. But that is the nature of human resources within the state, is the number to provide it. First, the best argument you can have is by starting with actual data. Here's your temporary staff, here's the work that they've been having go across their desk, and it necessitates a permanent position.
So we're almost seeing like two parts of a cycle, is
Yeah.
what you're explaining. Okay.
But an unofficial cycle, just kind of a nature of the beast situation.
Okay.
So so could you do without that sentence? It's something like, if it brings like this question mark and we need more,
I think,
or you could do without it.
yeah, although,
How the board feels about it.
I'm going to say something funny. It sounds kind of whiny. That's all. That's what comes to mind. And I don't mean it that way, but I think you're trying to point out something that maybe doesn't even need to be pointed out yet. And I think I don't want you to take it out. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, as I read it, I was like, okay, but now I understand the cycle that you're trying to describe better, which is that now you actually don't have as much temporary help available to help you with some of the ups and downs of the workload. And that's kind of what you're saying, is now you don't have as much of that. You've accomplished one thing, which was to create more of the permanent, and now you're not sure how you'll weather if there's a change in that workload and how temporary is going to be needed. Is that kind of what you're saying?
No. It was more, I wanted to show that even though we got additional positions, and technically, we didn't.
And then sorry, the reason I can't go with that is because we don't know what the 11. Those were 11.2 positions.
And it wouldn't add up that way. So you have 1,500 hours, I mean, I'd have to.
Yeah, the math actually works to our detriment. So the temp help positions aren't full-time. They can only work 1,500 hours in a calendar year. So where we get, mathematically in a chart, we get dinged for 11 positions, it's really more like a 0.7 for each of that represented whole.
I think that's where I'm at, like, if it leaves a question mark, does the board want more?
if you, I'm used to looking at these things in terms of FTEs, full-time employee.
Yeah.
And if we looked at it that way, or if we use that method of calculating, where would we be? Because I know that there are a number of people who are part-time in the office. So if we looked at FTEs, how many FTEs are we budgeted for? However the work gets distributed or any of that, how many FTEs are we budgeted for? And you add up the partials to be able to get to however many FTEs you got, and how many FTEs do we need? And we're utilizing how many FTEs of temp help to get as close as we can to what we really should be having, what we really need. I don't know if, I mean, you're in a position better to know how that calculation might work out, but I don't know if that would be helpful in describing this or not.
I can look at it when I get back to the office and see how it looks in terms of converting the temp help into PY. Why don't we start off like with that? And then I'll present it that way. And it might answer that question. It'll look, a little better, it'll be easy on the eye.
Could we possibly make a case for, when we look at just the full-time employees and we see that there's just been an increase in 3, but the actual load of work, and you use some number that shows the disproportionate increase in workload as to the number, and make a case in that direction? Because the full-time positions is a fixed, and we are having trouble with temporary work, workers or employees.
If we represented temp help for what it is in the table at that kind of 0.7, would that clear the numbers up? Because it's similar to the idea of doing full-time employee, where I'm measuring in tenths because of the tools that we have. So it translates smoothly, so that full-time, and temporary are both measured in the 10th model. So 11 wouldn't be 11, it would be 7.1 or something along that line. So it's a truer representation of what the labor measures.
Again, we can see how the board can look at that and see how it works. Or we can have more.
I believe that the numbers are going to show that we don't have as many full-time staff as what we should and what we need.
Right.
So how best to make that happen, and trying not to have just the number of bodies that we have who are as temp, because that's I think where it really gets iffy.
Yeah.
We are setting this, we're presenting this information in a way to kind of set up ask for more full-time employees. So I would use definitely now the full-time employer measurement because it's the most clear, and then make a huge motivation to say, the workload of the licensing population have increased at this rate, but we've only increased at 3. And immediately you will see the contrast, and not rely on the temporary, disclosing the temporary and basing our case on that, even though that could be our strategy for filling those positions. I think there's a way that you present it to whoever the committee that is looking at this, that is relevant information for our case. And then there's the background information to what we know, what we will do.
Yeah. On this chart, PY essentially is the equivalent of full-time employee. It's, 16.1 authorized full-time salary, benefits, space, storage, all that kind of thing. The discrepancy that's not congruent in the table is the temp help at 11 when it should be that .7 calculation, so
And are they always .7? Is that the way
that's
they-
the maximum.
That's the
And
maximum.
we usually bounce off the maximum.
So when I just kind of did the math on that, it turns out to be, it was 23.8 and now would be 21.5 for that comparison. So although it's not as dramatic, what you're
Still-
still seeing
more
is,
accurate.
yes, we may have got some positions authorized, however, we're
Yeah.
actually have less. And I think I would feel better if you do that kind of a comparison, if that's what you're trying to show.
Yeah.
Easy enough.
So you're changing how that sentence reads then to what?
I'm going to work it out once I do the numbers, then.
We'll keep the structure of the sentence, we'll just be changing the values.
Question 17?
We have another dollars issue towards the end, second to last paragraph.
I also had a question on this sentence. We're laying out two different dollar numbers for fiscal year 2014-15.
Oh, yeah.
So is that correct? Are those the actual fiscal years? And if so, should those be added together or specify $988 for outsourced training? Or what is it? What was,
In fiscal year, we spent 988, and then 430 in 14, 15.
We just need to change,
Oh.
It's
so
the
it's
date,
structured
yeah,
the
the
same
dates
way.
are the same.
What was the time?
They
Well-
both say 14, 15.
And the placement could be,
Yeah.
so in 14-15, spent 998, and in 15-16, spent 430, just so it's,
13, 14.
So this is 13, 14.
That's 14.
Okay. Section 4.
So I've, just to go back to the issue of training, or the issue of, so when staff are participating in breeze training, et cetera, is that time separated out as education time? Or is that time still lumped into time when they might be working on licensure?
there
Or,
is no separation.
So it's like administrative time or something to that nature?
Right, there's no separation for the purposes of measuring workflow, though. So that's a good, it's a good point, but it's a hard statistic to capture in a report of how much time was taken away from the typical mandate of the board and what we do on a day-to-day basis by the development and the training for Breeze. I mean, I probably ad nauseum, you've heard me say, 30%, 28%, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Staff's time was taken by participating in Breeze. We still have practically a full-time position. 7 out of 8 hours of his day is designated to Breeze at this point, so.
well, and it's not about the work that gets done on Breeze, but it's about, I'm wondering about the training for all of the individual staff members on Breeze, because that takes time away from when they can be doing
Absolutely.
the other work that they're in their position to do.
Yeah.
And if there's a way to try to capture that and say that we spent money on training during these times for people to be ready for Breeze, and it's more work to try to tease out how many hours
Yeah.
went towards doing that across the entire department, but across the entire office. But that helps to say, we actually, while we didn't have any special classes, we had ongoing training for Breeze, and everybody had to do training, and that took this amount of money away from our budget.
It would be a broad estimate. I mean, because we didn't track it at the time, and it varied from day to day, and it was kind of get in where you fit in situations.
Right.
It differs from a typical training request that goes through BCA and through the solid process. So there's an approval and there's documentation that we can rely on. With Breeze, it was really whenever your desk allows for it, you go down the hall and you go into a lab and you work on a computer. So let me see if I can come up with something I can defend.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it's helpful because then it's rather than saying that no money was spent on training and development.
Yeah,
Then you're like,
and that's a good
"Ugh."
point. It's no money was spent given the definitions provided on training and development. So,
However, we
yeah.
staff, 30% of staff resources went towards being able to be trained and ready for
Yeah.
Breeze.
Am I looking at that?
You and I will be looking at it.
So we're going to look at that, and another question, because I have it right now. So we're doing that for all the fiscal years? Are you consistent in?
It'll
Was it
depend.
only for 15, 16?
I mean, it really depends on what I can, it's a real, for me, I won't want to really state anything that I can't defend.
Right, right.
So,
We're going to stick with 15, 16. We're just working on it later.
it depends on what we can get.
What you can get, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's a valuable capture.
I have a question. In 17, at the end of the first paragraph, I was wondering what's meant by the management assessing the staff's knowledge, skills, likes, and dislikes for the purpose of improving business processes.
You wrote it.
Like, are you assessing, like, maybe their interests in certain areas, or?
Yes, and so when we have that one-on-one and we do the internal training, whether it be a staff person or, and management in a group setting or individual, we have that opportunity to really ask them, what is, as far as, what's going on, get their take on, for example, what's our busiest time of the year when it's graduation? I'll say graduation season. Some analysts may not like that period of time. And so, well, then what can we do to alleviate that? What can we do to help you? Maybe it's, within our control. Maybe it's, getting additional resources for that period, to help with the application process. Things like that. And so there's just a huge benefit when we do stuff like that.
There's a couple factors. We want to utilize what talents they have, if they're better suited for the applications unit or if they're better for the enforcement unit. The other factor, for some of the classifications in the regulatory world, is there's a factor of burnout. So enforcement analysts having to go through those kind of cases day in and day out, there's a real value of rotating them out of enforcement and into another unit and then back in so that you don't hit that burnout phase. But some people are numbers people, some people are, wordsmiths, and so there's better fits, and we want to use them to the best ability that we can.
Perhaps instead of likes and dislikes, strengths and weaknesses sounds more business oriented.
Thank you for that glimpse of what you do.
Yeah.
If you want to be very politically correct, you change weaknesses to areas of improvement.
Spoken like a true educator. Plus Delta.
Yeah.
Yes. You could just highlight it.
So ready for the next section, or?
I was thinking you could do a 10-minute bio break and then jump back in.
Okay.
Okay, we will reconvene at 2 o'clock. All right, we are back from recess. The time is 2:02 p.m. and we're picking back up in section 4.
Set a 30-minute timer.
It's optimistic. Didn't I give you that app? I'm the one that showed you that. You can't use that against me.
So can you scroll to the left of the document so we can see the line numbers?
Are you ready to go? Is there a next question? Well, this is a long question.
I'd say on line 1, if we could, let's just start on line 1. We could delete Physical Therapy Board of California because I think we're at the very least consistent with using PTBC throughout every single section, so we probably don't need to spell it out there.
Is this the one exception to? Is this the one exception to the style guide?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so, because it's used in every single sentence, so yeah, we probably don't have to repeat that one.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. On line 28, I think to contrast the first sentence of that paragraph with the second, we should put before the capital the at the end of that line, yeah. However, comma the.
I have a question on, it's about lines 35 and 36. I wasn't sure, the phrase "more recently" sounds like it's from a prior version or something. So I just had a question to ask about that.
I'm okay with removing it for confusion. I don't know what clarity it does bring. So it is a conjunction between the two. Whether one is more recent, the other is irrelevant.
So we could remove
More recently.
more recently, comma.
That was just to identify that in addition to finding a better way to measure our performance by establishing targets, we were doing that, and also part of more recently, we are doing the licensing performance measures with DCA. So that was an effort that just happened within the last year.
Oh, but that says it was issued in 2011. That's why I was trying to understand more recently.
That the executive order was back in 2011. The move to establish the licensing performance measures as department-wide
Yeah.
with the BREEZE system, and that was a big part of it, was the BREEZE system was within the last year.
So in 2011, the governor signed an order, or a directive, if you will, asking departments to go with performance-based budgeting. And so performance-based has trickled down over time. I mean, we did it in CPEI with enforcement and that kind of thing, where you have the performance measures, but that application has now gotten to our level, and it will be done department-wide.
But I think to your point, we can remove it. I
Yeah.
don't think it's
Okay.
necessary.
Yeah.
I'm confused with the title too, performance targets through Breeze.
So performance targets are usually something that you would put in regulation. We don't have that luxury just yet, but what we do have is the ability to create within a transaction goals to achieve. And so those performance measures, as a result of the governor's executive order, Breeze has kind of been the reason why we haven't implemented them up to now, because we were switching from legacy to Breeze and there'd be no way to measure performance. But now that we're comfortable with Breeze, they're starting to implement those gateways. They really are going to be data collected through that process as to whether or not we meet the performance measure or not.
Okay, because, so it's not performance targets achieved through implementation of Breeze, or that's not what it's,
No, there might be a better way to say this. I mean, it's defined in Breeze, I think is set in Breeze.
Could we, lines 37 through 38, could we insert the Breeze part of this there? Because right now, it seems really general. We participated, we're not really sure what level of participation there, but in the department-wide effort to establish performance measures, is that where we could put, we could identify that it's through Breeze?
Yeah, as measured by the Breeze system. I think that's probably the best place to put it, Sarah.
and so, and then to provide better measurement of the PTB's performance targets. Is it to provide more accurate measurement of the PTBC's, it's our achievement of reaching the performance targets, or our performance to meet, or I don't say the performance to meet the performance targets, but it's not just our measurement of, it's not the measurement of our performance targets.
It's the measure of our performance by achieving targets, but there's been a general philosophical change as a result of this executive order. The mandate before would clearly state when something needed to be completed by, and while we always fell well within that mandate, it didn't account for efficiencies realized through technology and those kind of things. So we had older language. With performance-based budgeting, they're now looking at it more of like kind of an incremental phase. You know, how long does it take for, well, as you see in the performance measures for enforcement. For applications and licensing, it's really about deficiencies in applications. So if we're trying to measure how long it takes from start to end, how much of the responsibility lays on the state and how much of it relies on the applicant. If sitting for the exam is just part of the system, that really shouldn't ding against how long it's taken to get licensed. So you would stop the clock. 99% of the applications received by this board are considered deficient because there are some things that still need to be attained, the examination being one, fingerprints being another, those kind of things. So to accurately measure how this board is performing in the process of that application, it needs to be, the deficiency needs to be considered because it relies heavily on the applicant's participation.
Would it be better to say, to provide more appropriate performance targets? Because I think really we're trying to adjust the performance targets, not measure the targets in a different way. We're actually trying to tweak the targets themselves.
I think that was, the issue was more that we didn't really have true targets. We had guidelines and regulation, we had the strategic plan to give us the objectives to meet, but we didn't have what in this context, performance targets. So.
Right, so maybe we could strike some of that A through PTBCs and insert appropriate. Or we could say to establish appropriate performance targets.
More appropriate.
So now the sentence needs to read differently then. I mean, what if you said in order to comply with Executive Order B, blah, 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 issue, blah, blah, blah. the PTBC participated in the Department of Consumer Affairs department-wide effort to establish more appropriate performance targets as measured by the BREE system?
Almost,
That's out on the license.
as a matter of sequence, I almost think we should start the sentence off with the order itself. As a result of Executive Order B13, the BTBC participate, I mean, it really was the driving factor. It's changed everything as far as how professional licensure is regulated in California.
And I just want to be sure that we are answering the question.
Right.
The question asks, what are our targets and expectations? Are we meeting them? If not, what are we doing to improve our performance?
And considering the audience that we're writing the report for, I think the route that we're going now is appropriate because they're familiar with it. That's part of the reason why they're asking the question, is because well, you see that the order was signed in 2011 and it's taken a while to get to this stage. So like some things in government, they're just wanting to see where we are progress-wise.
Through BREE.
Through BREES. Now, performance-based budgeting and licensing performance measures affects everyone, even those boards and bureaus that aren't on the BREES system. They had to do it a different way. But we have to be able to defensively report back something that measures performance.
Okay, so other than the chart, are we saying what our targets are and if they're being met? And if not, what are we doing about it? I mean, are those our 3 targets? Those are what our targets are, the 3 in the chart?
Those are what are our BREES targets now. Previously, we relied on the guidelines and regulation, meeting those that expectation.
And that chart continues down. No?
No, this is what's been
Oh, okay.
established for complete applications
Yeah.
for BREES, and then our actual processing time, I think it's way down in the
Yeah.
report. So the processing times are actually not provided in this section, or in this question.
I think we were providing the history, the sunset, and then what's happening now, because the measurements used in the last sunset review look completely different than what's happening in this one. So we were just trying to explain to the legislature why they're so different.
And that's what the legislature wants to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then the next sentence, because application processing is board-specific, each board identified its own processing time targets. Is that necessary?
I think it is, because for those, there's only a few of us that are going into sunset this time around that are on BREES. Some of the other, in the group of sunset reports that we're in this year are still R3 boards and aren't. So there'd be a distinction. So an analyst looking at this report, it would be important for them to know.
Okay, so then let's own it and say the PTB's application processing is board-specific. And the PTBC identified its own processing time targets.
Right, so application processing is
Is board-specific. The board identified it, just the board, capital B. Its own processing time targets. You could just delete each board and get it that way.
okay.
Yep.
Capital T, the board.
It is, I can make it a new sentence.
On line 38, should we also change licensing performance measures to be licensing performance targets so that it's consistent with the title.
This is actually how it's referred to in working with DCA, and this is actually what it's called, it's licensing performance measures. But we can change it, but this is just actually what it's called.
Or do parens targets?
We could do parens
Yeah,
targets and then
yeah.
also delete as measured by the breeze and just say department-wide effort to establish licensing performance measures, parens targets in the breeze system.
Targets.
Sorry.
I'm still having trouble with those two sentences being together. The PTBC's application processing is board-specific. The board identified its own processing time targets. Seems like we can do that in one sentence.
Or we
How about
can,
since the PTBC's application processing is board-specific, it has identified its own processing time targets? It's a suggestion.
Sounds better to me.
Fine.
Well, so I think since application processing times are board-specific, the PTBC identified its own processing time targets. Let's own this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You could just start off with the PTBC's
so
is board-specific. I like this. Yeah.
does it need to have times after,
Yeah.
since application processing times
Are.
are?
I really want to bring the point home. Is that the right spot? I don't think I put it in, I did not.
It's time.
Times.
Yeah,
not
so processing times.
Processing, as the word
Is it right
times.
here?
Yeah,
As the
right where
word
you're at,
times.
processing times are, delete is. There you go. Board-specific. PTBC identified its own processing targets were established for each breach. It flows much better.
Anybody keep going? Okay.
On line 8, can we do incomplete applications are now tracked by the PTBC?
Has not previously collected data
Yeah,
and not had data to
I would have
evaluate.
said the same.
Will you go back up, right there? Line 21. Processing time should be times with an S. And then later in that sentence, the same thing, processing times are.
Oh, did you, you have a question.
So on line 7, Of applications received, that needs to be a semicolon. And then resources deficits, insert a semicolon after that. And in the line below that, already in, insert the midst. Then on line 21, PTBC online, semicolon, that should be a comma. And the line below it, after accuracy, that's a comma. And on line 24, I had the same question on legacy systems, whether that
Capital
should
L.
be capital L.
Could I ask a question just a little higher up? Let's see. I'll change this down, please. It's actually just right above 19, Sarah. Like literally the last sentence above number 19. On mine, I can't now find it on your copy.
Oh, keep going up. I apologize.
Sorry, yeah, keep going up. No, I'm lost on mine.
So just above 19, you said? So the last,
Yeah.
The last of 18. So scroll down,
Yes, the last of 18, sorry.
Go into 19.
Is this out? This is A.
And you know what? So it's just it's down a little bit, right? It says
That should be
It should
19.
be 19 and not A.
Oh, you're right there,
Yeah, it
okay.
should be.
So right where your cursor is, just above it, greatly dependent upon the applicant. I wonder if we just need to give a little detail there, because we're sort of just saying, you know what, quite a bit of this depends on the applicant. How so? Do we want to say that, you know, their diligence in
Yeah.
submitting a completed
Applicants.
application or fee, you know?
In meeting requirement or meeting.
Yeah, however we want to say it. I just thought we
Submitting.
needed something to, hey, it's all on, yeah.
Something
But-
like follow-up?
Except I thought I read up there that the application, those timeframes all begin with the completed application.
They're measured at different gates, I guess, if you want to call it. So, and that's the difference in the two philosophies from the old world and the new world. And the old world being that if an application was incomplete, we wouldn't accept it. In some cases, we would just turn around and mail it back, meaning that they would have to have everything up front, with the exception of the examination score. That doesn't really provide very much convenience for the applicant. And with Breeze, and we're moving to an online system, they'll be able to do a lot of that work in advance, and then as deficiencies are fulfilled, provide them to the board. So just go with the electronic system and apply it, you know, equivalently through the paper product.
Okay, so reading the table, the way I read that was the processing time for a completed application. Like, once you got a completed one, that was the processing time. But
That's correct.
it is correct? Because now I'm wondering
Yeah.
if what it means is that it's the time frame that application will be completed.
No, it's if we have, it's, the intent is that if we have everything, all the requirements are met, exam scores, then that's the processing time, if that's how the application is submitted, upon receipt.
Okay,
So how
so
you're
so
working.
the clock that you're talking about, 45 days, begins when it's complete.
Well, If it's
When you
complete
have
upon
everything.
receipt. Yeah, when we have, well, this would be if it's complete upon receipt. So an initial submission, not necessarily, like if there's any deficiency at the time of receipt, then that just changes this whole thing. This doesn't really apply.
Okay, so then their diligence isn't within your timeframes, though?
That,
Because you have a complete application for your timeframes.
So
If I'm understanding what you're saying.
But that's, and so there's still, I guess, gateways, if you will. So that first one, 45 days to examination determination, there are requirements within the application process. And so I have to be very careful when you talk about completed application, because I think in general, we're thinking in totality.
Yep.
When there's really phases here, right? So for the first category, they have to meet all the criteria for examination. Once they do that, that moves them through that phase. That puts the 45 days on us to make them eligible and get them into the exam. They move on to the next stage, and in that stage, there are another set of requirements. Have we received their fingerprints? Have we received the score? And then that would lead to licensure determination. So there's still a stage process here that kind of confuses what completed means.
Can I point out that this paragraph is actually qualifying the timelines in that, the previous table? This paragraph is saying, these targets are for applications complete upon receipt. So it's saying, these numbers don't apply if it's not completed. And those times are going to depend upon the applicant's diligence. Does that help?
It's fine. It's fine.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, okay, so you've got a completed application, now your clock starts. So how does an applicant's diligence in successfully completing it affect your time, if it's already completed when your time started?
That would, if it wouldn't be complete. If they need to do something, so to where it's not, like if we didn't get a requirement fulfilled, then this processing time, it's not going, they're not going to.
They aren't
be
even
within
up
the
there.
45 days.
So
It's-
it won't
it's likely
affect your
to-
target,
It-
is
yeah, it
my
doesn't.
point. It doesn't affect your meeting the target.
So it needs to be
it doesn't.
It would
taken
be a
out.
separate group, a separate measurement of incomplete
Yeah.
applications.
There you go.
Mhm.
And
And that's
the
what
separation in language there is it's really the total application processing time is greatly dependent on the applicant's diligence.
Or the time for an applicant to make it through this whole process, not their processing time.
Yes.
So that sentence should be either deleted or changed.
We kind of talk about,
Basically, the clock hasn't even started.
Right.
That's what I'm
If
trying
it
to say.
hasn't been completed. So that sentence starting on 20 probably could be deleted because it doesn't even apply right now.
And yeah, I think you're making a good point, which is there is a part of getting through the application process that's all the applicant, the applicant has a big part, and that's to provide that complete application.
and I think that's the separation that I think needs to be made, where we're saying the application processing time, which kind of relates you back to the target,
Yeah.
which isn't quite accurate, but completion of the application is greatly dependent upon the applicant's participation.
Yep.
The process, the application process. Let's see, we're right back to process or processing.
And that, what you just described, it doesn't have anything to do with our target.
Right.
With that chart.
So perhaps we do need to just take this out.
Maybe not the right.
Or you guys want
Oh,
to...
not the right place, yeah. It's worth noting somewhere, or in some other words.
Exactly.
So I'll comment this.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's going to come in the next question, because that's when it's starting to ask about overall processing.
Yeah. Yeah, it asks about pending applications.
Anybody have anything? I'm not even sure to reference them, that the references don't match up, but.
Like the second section under new teams titled Changes to Application Processing. And license issued through Breeze.
Okay.
Just the first sentence, Breeze's comprehensive application, blah, blah, blah. We know that. They know that. So I'm not sure why that sentence needs to be there. And then potentially starting with the second sentence, Breeze, instead of prominent Breeze functions, just Breeze functions that increase efficiency are ability for applications license to submit requests online.
I think the first sentence provides an introduction, and it's.
I read that, I understand that, but I think that the audience is going to understand, they know that already. They know what Breeze is what it's supposed to do. I don't know that we need to tell them, especially because the section asks, what have the changes been since you've started Breeze?
I think this might be one of those times when we're also explaining it to the public at large, because this is going to be a public document. We're just kind of describing what Breeze is. However, we've already talked about Breeze many times through this document, so I guess if we were going to do that, we would want to do it sooner than here. So yeah, I guess most likely it could probably just be deleted here.
That sentence doesn't, these functions that increase efficiency are the ability?
So I think there needs to be some kind of intro into this.
You could do Breeze functions increase, so delete that. Increase efficiencies.
For the applicants, for applicants.
And the ability for applicants.
Yeah.
Or provide.
Or the efficiency, or the.
Well, what she was saying was, she's trying to highlight some of the Breeze functions that increase efficiency, and then she lists 3.
So maybe provide efficiencies, including the ability for applicants.
And then the final sentence, these efficiencies, I don't know that we need to say clearly, are reflected in the license renewing time with Breeze compared to the legacy, the previously used legacy systems, or compared to the legacy systems previously used by the PTPC. So striking what it was with the.
Did you also want to remove clearly?
I don't think it needs to be there.
I know this is stating the obvious, but do we want either improved or reduced license renewal processing time?
Yeah.
These efficiencies are reflected in the, improved or reduced time?
I think reduced is probably a better way to state it.
In thousands of dollars.
Taking notes.
2 hours of notes.
On line 14, I think we need "and" between licenses and certifications. So then I had a question about footnote 8. The second sentence says the licensee can have a license status that is active, inactive, delinquent, or retired. My question is, does that mean that out of state, the out of state numbers in that table are part of active or inactive?
That's what that was trying to address. There was some confusion of that the out-of-state wasn't specifically for just active licenses. So we're trying to identify that that out-of-state includes a number of license statuses.
You might remember from
Yeah, we
past
talked about this.
discussions that we took liberties at the table because we didn't want a takeaway to be that, out of the 21,754 active in fiscal year 12-13, that 2,507 of them were out of state. It would be an inaccuracy. It doesn't account for the other statuses that might also be included in out of state. So we added the most significant number we thought should be listed with inactive, but listing every status would, drown out the data a little bit. But it's important to note that the two numbers don't have anything to do with each other. We're giving them what they asked for on the template.
So would it be true to say that active, inactive, and delinquent captures the total number of licenses?
No.
Could somebody be in two of those categories?
No, so there's a couple missing. So retired would be missing. Primary status, we're getting close. I think the only other consideration is that delinquent is a very delicate number to rely upon because delicate in the sense that it's captured on a yearly basis, but the number of people that go into delinquent status could last for a period of 48 hours. They could be delinquent and then renew really fast, but they just they count as a statistic in that category. So they could definitely be represented twice.
Whereas out of state and out of country is just based on address.
Correct.
Could those be separated at the bottom of a category and be maybe the top three get bolded or something? Or based on address?
Yeah, because if we're including out of state also inactive or inactive, then that
Well,
doesn't need its own
So the
delineation
specific-
right there.
the specifics asked for in the template are active, out of state, out of country, and delinquent.
So that's
That's
coming
the
from.
template from the legislature.
Okay.
We included inactive because we thought that was significant enough of a number that we didn't want it to be skewed and the perception to be, at that point, a little more than 10% of our people are out of state.
Okay. So really, I think what they're looking at is how many people are licensed in California that don't live here. They're just looking at the number.
Yep.
And then how many are
Yep.
licensees are active. Okay. So also I wanted to ask if in footnote 8, if it should be licensee's address of record, or do you actually consider the address of record to be tied to the license itself? The person or the license?
I'm okay with either way, but I see for consistency's sake where that's a property issue.
I'd probably put licensee because you're mentioning licensee everywhere else.
Yeah.
You're not actually talking about the license itself.
I did have kind of a more general question regarding the table. Licensing population, we've listed physical therapist assistant, but then we've gone on to also specify what we recognize now as a specialty certification. In legacy, we had no choice but to acknowledge EN and EK as different license types. It was the only way we could categorize them within the system. Now they're specialty certifications attached to the parent license. Do they qualify to be listed as licensed population?
If they're attached to another license.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of see how the board feels about that.
When did that change take place?
With Breeze. So since the last report.
So does the last sunset have it broken out this way?
It does.
Then I think we should present it this way.
Okay.
And then, I mean, if you want to add a note somewhere that with implementation of Breeze in 2015,
So the footnote, I think, covers that.
Yeah.
Right,
Number
Okay.
footnote 9.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I wanted to make a change in footnote 9. I think with the conversation should be conversion.
The next paragraph, the first sentence is kind of weird. It says below are two tables 7A, which provide. It should be in parentheses or something? Or, I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, I think you're definitely trying to say that there are two tables 7As. And that's because it's breaking out physical therapists versus physical therapist assistants.
So my question would be, if they're asking for a table 7A, in the previous table, we were able to parcel out PTs from PTAs. Can't we weave the PTA data right into this table?
We were, initially we were doing it that way, but it made the table very difficult to read.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of data on a single table.
Could we effectively just delete the spaces between the two? And then just have table 7A, which is licensing data by type, PT, and then delete where your cursor is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Delete that, delete table 7A, just
Yep.
that piece, and then it'll just say licensing data
Yeah.
by type PTA.
Thank you.
And that's going to be all formatted
Yeah.
to have the digits.
Yeah, you'll see some of the descriptors across the top, and the bars they're missing because they weren't put back in after the formatting, so.
Why not table 7A, table 7B?
What is the far right of that? What's ACC?
Oh, that needs to be clarified. You have accredited and non-accredited. So
Okay.
US graduates and graduates of non-accredited.
Yeah, 7.1, 7.2.
A decision that's left, that still hasn't been made yet, and you'll see it in the table of those two columns where it says combined, if unable to separate out. We're having a very difficult time separating it out, so you might just see one column and it be combined, so.
Before this, there was a change made in regards to the renewal process, and it was a change for either improved or reduced. Do you mind, can we consider improved instead of reduced?
I'm not sure that the layperson would know what improved means.
My concern is that I don't want to leave the impression or thought of that the workload would be decreased. Because for me, if I would to read that, because I do, I work with numbers and things like that, I know it could be construed that way. If we're reducing the processing timeframes for renewals, then that means our workload would decrease, naturally.
Yeah, I think potentially is probably, I think you struggle with that regardless of what word you use.
Okay.
Improved would also, some people might say that you've improved the processing time, and as a result, you'd have less, labor involved.
It's just a thought.
Absolutely. I think
I was just
and
thinking
I'm
about
trying
it.
to go back to where it was, but the context of the sentence for that particular section really was more about the potential for the application process you can see is going to change over time. The reflection, and we know that because of the reflection that we see in the renewal processing time.
So it reduced the time, the processing time to the
Overall,
applicant.
right, exactly.
To the applicant.
Mhm.
It didn't reduce the renewal process.
Yeah, it's a really good example too, because, your renewal being sent through snail mail, being received by central cashiering, being processed, being sent over to the board, all those steps can and given the right choice by the applicant, eliminated completely, and they renew online, and it's instantaneous. There's no wait 48 hours, there's no wait 7 to 8 days, there's none of that. So reduced is fairly accurate.
Since we're back here,
Oh, sorry.
the next section, elimination processing efficiency, or examination processing efficiencies, the first sentence doesn't talk about efficiencies, it talks about licensure inefficiencies. And then the rest of it goes on to talk about the alternate approval pathway. And I'm wondering, was there a typo, or is there an intent to call attention to an inefficiency?
That was, yes, so the inefficiencies were identified, one of them being the examination process. And so but that inefficiency is being addressed with the alternate approval pathway. And so it was just that, this is something that the board's looking at, and here's what's happening about it, here's what we're doing. But if that's not clear, then we can definitely look at it.
I'm wondering, just because the title is examination process efficiencies, and then, the first thing is to talk about an inefficiency.
Yeah, I don't mind striking the word efficiencies from the title.
If it doesn't have to be in the title?
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
You could also change in the title it to read examination processing improvement through alternate approval pathway. That might capture what's about to be discussed a little bit better. So the focus is less on efficiency or inefficiency. The focus is really on this alternate approval pathway.
Clearer, thank you.
Table 70.
And some of the data, the blank data will be filled in. Still working on that. And this one is more blank because it's dependent upon some of the data in the tables above. So that's why you're seeing that. And except for the outside of board control and within board control, that may not be there still because we don't collect that. So it's likely that those will remain blank. So this, none of the numbers carried over? My goodness. So I'm down to examinations. I'll stop there if there's something.
Will you go up a bit to E, rather D?
D,
Line 13,
114.3?
line 13,
Oh, line 13, okay.
there has been no impact.
You know what, I just realized, my letters and numbers are different than yours, so I'm trying to find out where you are.
Mine too.
So she's in item 23.
Then I have a question, what is in my document as item 22, the legal requirement and process for out-of-state and out-of-country applicants?
Is that after or before military?
Before.
Yeah, keep going up.
There you go. I just had a question, which is about the fifth bullet down. I thought there was a bill for no need for a social security number or tax ID number.
No, one or the other.
One or the other?
Yep.
All right, thanks.
In B, right there, line 30, I think we need to add after all of those applicants, just to make it a little more clear. If that's
Applications.
correct.
Applications.
Okay.
Still not spelled.
There you go, she got it. She's all over it.
Sir, could I have you, I think, go back up to the very end of 23, right before, sorry, the end of 22, before 23 begins?
Right.
No, above. So
Keep scrolling
going
up.
Here?
Yes. So, so 25, line 25, in addition to meeting the general application requirements, a physical therapist applicant who graduated from a non-accredited physical therapist education program is required to, I've got two questions. One, I'm not really sure I understand the first bullet point, the way the sentence is structured. Submit proof of completion of education equivalent to that at the time of the graduation, to that issued by an accredited program.
To that.
Yeah, and the second thing is, do we need someone who graduated from a non-accredited physical therapist education program in an English-speaking country? Or, well, we don't have any, yeah, we do have we have any non-accredited PT programs currently in the U.S.?
No,
Or they have sort of,
not a PT
You know,
program. I mean,
pending,
you have,
yeah.
you know, kinesiological programs,
Okay.
those kind of things.
but it's assumed that these are foreign, or applicants from foreign.
Mhm.
Okay. That was it. I just was having trouble digesting
Yeah,
the two that's.
and that,
I think that's how the statute's worded.
it is
Okay.
actually how the statute's put.
Of course it is. That's why I'm having trouble.
Yeah,
It wasn't me.
You gotta go to law school to understand how to apply.
Do we have to word it the way it's worded in statute?
no.
No, okay.
You know what, I think there's too many to that's.
Verbiage then.
Line 28, submit proof of completion of education equivalent
I'll
At the time
have,
of
to,
graduation?
I guess, to that education at the time of graduation.
I'll let the wordsmith have
Yeah,
at it. I just don't want to
that's
lose
a
the,
mess.
at the
Right.
time of graduation
Right.
for this particular question. It is relevant.
Okay, equivalent to that issued by an accredited program at the time of graduation.
Wow. You want me to never play Scrabble with you?
Yeah.
Do we need to put in line 25, a physical therapist, well, a foreign physical therapist applicant?
That was my question
Just
in the
a-
TOEFL, yeah.
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 Let me look up the statute. Because I think that's going to be really instructive.
I think you'll see in regulation as a whole, us straying away from the use of the word foreign. And so non-accredited is a better descriptor.
Well, there's non-accredited, but could they also, those be in the United States?
No,
Okay.
not for a PT program. And only because of an anomaly that occurred in Florida for a PTA program, which has already been legislatively resolved.
Is everyone pretty comfortable with this? Yeah.
Hold on.
I'd like to come back to this once I locate the statute. We're on page 44.
I think you're looking at 2653. So,
Okay. So the clarification here, page 44. The statute itself says, an applicant for a license is a PT who's graduated from a PT education program that is not approved by the board and is not located in the United States. And I think that gets at the foreign element, but that's not reflected in 25 through 27. We see out-of-state applicant above,
Right.
but we don't see
Yeah, there's no mention of.
not located
Yeah.
in the United States. So after, let's see,
program? that is
right on
not
line
located.
27, program not located in the United States.
And that takes care of the out-of-country.
You guys are doing it for the United States.
So she's coming up on item 24, if anyone's keeping track by item number.
Is that no longer interested? Which one is 24?
Right.
Okay.
So this is item 25. I have a question about this quote, starting on line 9. First off, I think you need to attribute that to the FSBPT. I think at the beginning of that, you can say, according to the FSBPT, comma. But overall, on line 22, it says excerpt taken from the FSBPT's website, October 19, 2011. Is there anything newer?
No. They're in the middle of it now.
Well, Actually, I think my point is that the excerpt is dated October 19, 2011. Is that true?
Like
It's
if
not
you
that you've
accessed it today,
accessed
is that
it.
what you would find?
Exactly.
No.
Right. So we,
And that was an issue in the prior review, is that there is information, but it's not as succinct for this purpose as this is, as in explaining the exam.
so I think all we need is, we need to note that that excerpt is dated October 19, 2011, not the, when we found it on a website. So perhaps on line 22, we could just say, October 19, 2011 excerpt taken from that website, and then you provide the actual website address. And I think maybe that gets us there.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, we also need to verify the hyperlink. The hyperlink there is no good.
But if it was hyperlinked, it would go, that wouldn't, the information wouldn't be there.
Did you recently verify this? You did? So, well,
So it's no longer, that was the issue, that this information is.
what you could
Oh, it's no
do,
longer available.
So it's quoted at a time.
what you could
caption
do
where it
is,
was from.
and we can do this later. There's an actual way of citing to web pages, and you put in brackets as of the date that you checked it. That way, a reader who's pulling this up in 5 years knows that that was accurate 5 years ago. It may not be today. So this is item 26. And now we're on item 27. On line 8, testing centers should be lowercase to be consistent with prior mentions of prometric testing centers. So that's item 28. Now we're at item 29. Item 30.
29? Line 10 are deemed approved the PTBC.
Yeah, by.
Yeah.
Item 30. Item 31.
I think I have one. I'm trying to catch myself where you are on 31. Line 37, you can, right before CAPD, you can just take out the.
Item 32. We're still under item 32.
Under B, what line is that? If a license is certified, as he, she is certified upon renewal, second line, 31, line 31, as he or she is certified,
Oh,
is what?
this is saying when they sign the renewal, so when they have certified,
Oh,
but it was missing.
yeah.
Oh, then I'm not sure that it needs has, now that I read it again.
Yeah, no,
Doesn't?
I think it could be there, but
And if it wasn't clear, if it needs a revision too.
so it's saying that if, during an audit, if they were able to demonstrate compliance such as they had certified when they renewed, then they passed.
So if they said, yes, I have it, and that can be supported during
yeah,
the
the
audit.
has can be removed.
Yes, no?
I don't think it's necessary.
Either way.
Is it confusing to have that extra information in there, that the licensee certified on the renewal? Instead of just saying licensee, if they demonstrate sufficient compliance, then they pass the audit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be clear.
That one? Oh, you're looking at yours, but, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, she could be there.
Now, I know this was edited in the enforcement section. We can do the same thing to keep it consistent. So I believe the insufficient hours was grouped into, or no, I'm sorry, the course is not completed by an approved agency. That was moved into not meeting, basically not having sufficient hours. We can make this consistent.
I have a tweak in H on the next page. It's probably at line 13. No, line 3.
Right here?
Line 3.
Oh, 3, I'm sorry.
Toward the end, at least 10% of the providers. And on line 5, the PTBC has removed. Line 13, performance-based, put a hyphen.
That's it.
That's it.
There are, let me pull up the template. There is a section that there's really not much to review. It's the inclusion of attachments. And we'll be putting the admin manual, the existing organizational chart of the board, and the historical organizational charts for the last 4 fiscal years. Those we'll be providing at the 28th meeting. And you'll see it all sewn together. The document is going to probably double in size. So we're going to be including the performance measures early on, and then the attachments on the bottom, the covers, and those kind of things. So it's going to get pretty thick when we send it out to you for next review. So just keep that in mind.
Do we need to vote on the edits that we made, or that we just make the edits and then vote on the final version?
I don't know if there's anything, there are a few items here, but I don't think a motion is necessary.
I
Okay, just checking.
I agree because we're going to continue the review of this document at the next meeting, at which time the board would need to vote to submit it to the legislature.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you guys need a bio break, or you want to just power through elections? Yeah? Okay. Let's move right along to the next agenda item, number 16, board member elections. Oh, yes.
Workman's comp.
Hola. Oh, sorry.
We're going to fix that.
Hi.
So I've never done an election before, not sure how this works. Do I say, there are any nominations for the
Yeah.
position of president? Okay.
Call for nominations.
Okay, I'm calling for nominations.
I'd like to nominate Katerina Allaby,
And I'd like to nominate Alicia Rabina Amen.
and I'd like to thank you and respectfully decline.
And I'd like to insert that I will be absent for 2 of the meetings next year and potentially out of the country for several months, which may be difficult for me to give staff what they need to process the things that they need to get done. Jason did mention, though, that you may be able to do some of those administrative things for me, or whoever is elected vice president will be able to do those things for me
Yeah, in
on
the
my
absence of the president, the vice president would be the next in line.
I'd like to nominate Daniel Drummer for position of president.
Thinking.
For the record, while the nomination for Alicia Rabina Aman has been rejected, has the nomination for Katerina Ellaby been rejected as well?
I'm also thinking.
Okay.
Should we just nominate everybody at the dais
We should.
Are there any other nominations?
and go that way?
Are there any other nominations?
Or do we need them to accept?
That's the issue at hand.
It's the majority of the board. I'm figuring this out now.
Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, I didn't know if we needed a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we need to know if they're accepting a nomination.
You were nominated first, you have to answer.
Age before beauty.
Well, then I'll wait for you.
Let me see your driver's license. Okay, I accept the nomination. Thank you, Alicia.
I'm going to decline at this time, thank you.
I'd be a horrible poker player. Okay, I guess I would need a second then.
I'll second that.
Thank you, TJ. Now, moving on to the position of...
I still have to vote.
No.
Okay. Do I need public comment for this? No.
No.
Really? Okay, all in favor of electing Katerina Allaby as president? Pause.
Tony McMillan, aye. Deborah Alviso, aye.
TJ Watkins, aye.
Alicia Rabina Amen, aye.
Jesus Dominguez, aye.
Daniel Drummer, aye.
I guess I vote for myself. Katarina Ellaby, aye. The vote was unanimous. I'm gonna look at this. Okay. Moving on to the next position of Vice President. Are there any nominators open for the position of Board Vice President?
I'd like to nominate TJ Watkins.
And I would like to nominate Alicia. I will put it.
I'd like to nominate Jesus Dominguez.
We have 3 nominees. Who's supposed to respond first?
I will second all of those nominations.
Let's slow down a little bit. And after a nomination is made, let's find out if the person being nominated accepts the nomination. So we'll start with the first nomination from Alicia of TJ, if TJ accepts the nomination.
I'll accept the nomination.
And then asking of Alicia if she accepts Mr. Watkins' nomination.
So before I accept the nomination, I'm happy to serve and fill the role, but I'm also happy to pass that on to someone else and let them experience that. Yeah,
Okay.
just to, let someone else experience it.
So in total, you accept,
I accept.
having said that? Okay.
Yeah.
This makes it very easy for me. I thank you, but I'm going to decline at this moment.
Now you can second all the nominations.
Are there any other nominations?
Are there any other nominations? Any discussion by the board?
You've heard my discussion.
May I have a motion?
I'd like to second Alicia's nomination.
Okay. I'd like to second TJ's nomination. Okay, so I guess we're going to take this to a vote, huh? So, all those in favor of electing TJ Watkins as Board Vice President?
How do we do the roll call?
Roll call, yeah. Who wants to start us off? Tanya?
TJ Watkins, aye.
Is that how we're doing it?
No, say your name. Say your name.
McMillan,
Mhm.
For TJ.
Mhm.
Deborah, I would, no.
TJ, you got to vote for yourself, yay or nay.
But I nominate
Yeah,
her,
okay.
so I say no to me, but I to her. This is confusing.
Such an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alicia Rabina, amen, yes, for TJ Watkins.
Katarina Ellaby, aye.
Really, no offense to either candidate, but
None taken.
so for sake of continuity, I would, Jesus Dominguez, I would say no at this time.
Dan Drummer, no.
And for, let's see, I got to vote for,
Let's read that vote.
okay.
So it's 4 yeses and 3 noes.
That was 4 yeses and 3 nos for TJ. Now we're going to vote for Alicia.
Oh,
Oh, you're done.
No, that was it? Okay.
that's the majority.
Correction, I counted 4 noes. I counted Dr. Alviso, TJ Watkins, Jesus Dominguez, and myself.
Oh, I think I had you as a yes. You're a no? Okay.
Mr. Watkins voted no for Mr. Watkins.
Would you like to change your vote?
We're going to run into a hanging Chad situation here.
I think Russia hacked this election.
Yeah, this is, No, I'm gonna stay with my vote now.
Okay.
Because-
Congratulations, Alicia Rubina, amen.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and a formal vote, voting Alicia as board vice president.
Okay.
So we'll do roll call.
So all in favor of electing Alicia Rubina, amen, as board vice president?
Tanya McMillan, aye.
Deborah Alviso, aye.
TJ Watkins, aye.
Elise Rubina, amen, aye.
Katerina Ellaby, aye.
Jesus Dominguez, aye.
Daniel Drummer, aye.
The vote was unanimous. Thank you. I need your cheat sheet. Okay. Any nominations are now open for the position of FSBPT delegate. I would like to nominate Alicia Rubina, amen.
And I'll second that.
Just accept first.
Oh,
I'll accept. Thank you.
I would like to nominate TJ Watkins.
And I'll second.
He has to accept.
Oh,
I'll accept.
I second.
Any further nominations for FSBPT delegate? Hearing none. Let's move this to a vote. All those in favor for, all those in favor for electing Alicia Rubina, amen, as the delegate for FSBPT. We're going to do roll call starting with Tanya.
Tanya McMillan, yes. Deborah Alviso, no.
TJ Watkins, yes.
Elise Rubina, amen. Abstain.
Katerina Ellaby, yes.
Jesus Dominguez, no.
Daniel Drummer, yes.
So it's 2-1 or 3-2?
3-2.
Okay, so
Wait, 4-2. 4, 5, 6, 7,
4
4.
to 2, going for Alicia. So now we're going to officially vote you in as the FSBPT delegate. All those in favor of electing Alicia Rubina, amen, as the FSBPT delegate?
Tanya McMillan, yes. Deborah Alviso, yes.
TJ Watkins, yes.
Elise Rubina, amen, yes.
Katerina Ellaby, yes.
Jesus Dominguez, yes.
Daniel Drummer, yes.
The vote was unanimous. Congratulations, Alicia Rubina, amen. You are now the FSBPT delegate for 2017. Now nominations are open for the FSBPT alternate delegate.
I nominate TJ Watkins.
And I nominate Daniel Drummer.
Would you like to accept your nomination, TJ?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm like,
No.
I second TJ's nomination.
Any other nominations for the FSBPT alternate delegate? Madam Legal Counsel, do we need to vote if he's the only candidate?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor for Mr. Watkins being the FSBPT alternate delegate?
Tanya McMillan, yes. Deborah Alviso, yes.
yes. TJ Watkins.
Elise Rubina, amen, yes.
Katerina Ellaby, yes.
Jesus Dominguez, yes.
Daniel Drummer, yes.
Congratulations, TJ. You are the FSBPT alternate delegate, which means you do have to attend the annual conference. Just a point of clarity. Moving right along to the nominations for FSBPT backup alternate delegate. Nominations are now open.
I nominate Daniel Drummer.
I'll accept.
Second.
Any further nominations? All those in favor of Daniel Drummer being the FSBPT backup alternate delegate?
Tanya McMillan, yes. Deborah Alviso, yes.
TJ Watkins, yes.
Elise Rubina, amen, yes.
Katerina Ellaby, yes.
Jesus Dominguez, yes.
Daniel Drummer, yes.
The vote was unanimous. Congratulations, Dr. Drummer. You are the backup alternate delegate for the FSBPT Annual Conference in 2017. I believe that concludes
Oh,
the
one
board
second.
member. Okay.
So at this point, staff would look for a motion to include the rest of the board membership in alphabetical order as alternates after Daniel. In the event that something arose, that we would always have a contingency plan in place that if not TJ, if not Alicia, if not Daniel, then it would go on to the next. And the reason that we do that is if that were to happen, we would have that arrangement already in advance with FSBPT, and it would be easy to do.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Tanya McMillan, yes.
Deborah Albiso, yes.
TJ Watkins, yes.
Alicia Rabina Amon, yes.
Katerina Ellaby, yes.
Jesus Dominguez, yes.
Daniel Drummer, yes.
My vote was unanimous. We're all going to the FSBPT Annual Conference. Now, does that conclude the elections for
That's all that I have,
2017?
Madam
Great.
President.
Well, I believe then all that remains on our agenda is public comment, not on the agenda. Hearing none. Legal counsel, did I cover everything on the agenda that was supposed to be for business today?
You may want to ask if anyone has a future item to discuss at the next meeting.
Yes. Are there any future items or agenda items for future meetings? Hearing none, then
Can I just, I know we've said it before and we're going to say it again, but I just want to say that I'm sure the sentiment is shared. We really appreciate all you guys do. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys worked really hard on this and we can tell. Thank you.
Thank you.
I second that. And, yeah,
Yes.
Thank you, Tara.
shout out. All right, we are officially adjourning this meeting. The time is 3:29 PM. Thank you, guys.